Thank you. Good afternoon. This was the C suite, and now it's the J suite. So we're going to wear the Dean out today, and I've got several questions that I wanted to ask Jim, and then also if anything pops for you guys, feel free, raise your hand, and we'll just kind of ham and egg it together. And again, it's my pleasure to be with someone that's really helped me and I think helped Vanderbilt Owen an awful lot over the years. So let's start with Mom and Dad. Tell us a little bit about Mom and Dad and maybe where you grew up.
My parents were generally from the South. My father from Florida and Georgia, kind of wandered back and forth. My mother from Mississippi, from the Delta of Mississippi. I have a picture of him, and he was a Air Force, Army Air Corps pilot from World War II through a wing commander in Vietnam. And so my life of where I grew up was wherever Dad was or wherever we were holding to while we were. So I spent a lot of time in the South and Southwest. Spent a time in the Philippines as a child, and then went to high school in Germany, in Wiesbaden, Germany, which at the time was headquarters for the Air Force in Europe. My parents had a very interesting relationship. Dad was gone great portions of the time. He sort of fought in every theater and every major event in global policemanship as we were doing, as our country was doing things in the Dominican Republic and in Africa and other places of the world. Wherever there was a crisis, he generally was. And so I'd see him and not see him. My mother was now deceased, but still in my mind, somebody I think of every day, my father as well. They had an interesting marriage, and I learned not to play bridge because of that. Bridge was a contact sport in my house. And my mother was a plate thrower. So my mother was a life master bridge player. She would direct tournament bridge in New York and Chicago and LA and Las Vegas. And my father would come home from work, and she would have 4 bridge hands dealt. And her name was Blanche, and my father was called Brad. I'm a junior, but she called him Brad. And she would say something like, "Bid the hands," and Blanche, "I'm not bidding the hands." "Bid the damn hands." "I'm not bidding the hands." And therein would start an argument, and he would bid the hands, and she'd tell him what a fool he was or how wrong he was. She was using the wrong convention. And that usually developed into a Donnybrook, and it's a card game, and so that was the household I grew up in. A lot of conflict and a lot of love, and so they were fun to be around.
So that's why the labor negotiations didn't scare you in later years?
Right. No, it seemed pretty right at home. I just wasn't used to that.
So for those that don't know, Susan and Jim were high school sweethearts, and if I were to have a goal for the students, it would be to be able to have the trifecta that Susan and Jim have had. They've done the kid thing, they've done the career thing, and they've done the marriage thing. And I think that's a hell of a trifecta that all of us should strive to try to do that. And can you just kind of help the kids, maybe the students today, with, when you think about the journey, what did you and Susan really learn, or what can you share that helped you pull off this trifecta that is very rare these days?
Well, I met her crashing a slumber party when I was 17, and we went separately away to college, commuted across college. She went to Randolph-Macon's Women's College in Virginia, and I went to Florida. I was the first person to go to college in my family, and we didn't go look at colleges or tour colleges. So we dated across college, on and off, mostly on, and got married toward the end of college. And she had a military intervention in there, and then she was not in our old marriage, but because of Vietnam. And so she was supposed to start a PhD program here at Vanderbilt at the same time I was supposed to start the law degree. And we had this event happen, which was our first son being born, and she decided to not do the PhD program and stay with him. So one of the things that happened with us is we grew up together. And I think we didn't have 2 cents together when we got married, and so having to struggle through the early marriage and all the issues that go on, and the first jobs and the transitions, I think really strengthened us. That's not something everybody's going to do, but I think finding ways that you really, marriage to me is really each party giving about 150%. It works out okay like that. I've learned some great marital phrases. Yes, dear. I love you. Anything you want to have happen, dear, go ahead, buy it, and those are great marital comments that I've gotten to a stage in life where I now can afford. I couldn't afford that earlier, but seriously, we've had a great time together, and we've also, across life, developed a couple of things that we do together that are not kids and not about the house or about the job or whatever else. We have some hobbies and things we do together, and that really has helped us kind of maintain and refresh. That'd be good.
That's great.
So,
well, that's quite an accomplishment. Congratulations. So for the students that are saying, hey, I don't know what I really want to do, I'm going to start here, don't worry about here, because you can go there as well. And I think it would be great if you could share, you go from an in-house, or from a private practice to an in-house at AFG, and then the CEO, kind of help the students, if you will, on when did you either know that you wanted to or felt like you could become CEO, because that's not the path that is typical. It happens, but not typical. So tell us when you felt it, or when you thought, hey, maybe this is where I want to end up.
Well, I think the law practice was interesting. I was doing primarily two things. We had about 5 clients nationally that we went wherever they went, and so I did a lot of M&A work with those folks. And then I did a lot of labor negotiations for companies that were, and those two don't fit, but they sort of do when you get done. And I was spending probably half my time as a young lawyer with a partner in this firm with one client, with this client, AFG, and they figured out they could buy me cheaper than they could rent me, and so offered me to go inside. And I got inside, and it was a whole new world, because much of law is that you have some problem, you work on that problem's done, you're buying something, you're selling something, you're solving a problem, then you get past it. And investment banking, lots of consulting, lots of issues are like that in life, and they're not very much different from law. But I got inside an organization, I was suddenly handed the opportunity to not only have a transaction, run a transaction, but also then be responsible for what happened next. The integration of the operation that you bought, or dealing with the consequence of whatever the problem you were dealing with. And that was very freeing. And I suddenly found that business was a lot more exciting to me. And law is kind of, with all due respect, is kind of he who or she who has the largest army wins. So if you can obfuscate and delay, that's the lawyer's work. And so I'm being a little facetious here, but just saying really that what was interesting to me was business was much more difficult. There are many more moving parts. There are competitors out there. There's the economy. There's disintermediation in an industry or in some new technology that's invented and changes your whole world. And I think it's intellectually far more challenging. That was what really caught my attention. And then once you kind of get there, then you want to have your hand, at least I did, want to have my hand on the throttle. So how do you get your hand on the throttle? That's what I wanted to do. I want to run this thing. And to do that, I didn't start out that way, but I evolved that way. And it became, once I got to know the customers and the industry and the competitors and the technology and the people, it really inspires you. It did me, and that's kind of where I want to go. Not everybody's going to get there. I didn't know I was going to get there, but fortune has its way of happening. So
that's great. I started in sales and learned the same thing, how companies work, which is what you did, right? You learned how it really worked.
Right.
And great experience for trying to see how things work this way instead of this way.
Right. And I would encourage, and I guess one of my takeaways is go out and spend some time in any industry you're in or any company you're in. Go watch what's happening in some of the places that you don't have any responsibility for, but how does that fit in the organization? And what is its function? Or could you do that better? Or who does that? Or why do they do that? I think a lot of times you go into a company and why do you do it this way? Well, we've always done it that way. That's a kind of standard answer. So it was fun to go see that stuff. I like to go do that experiment.
So for those that don't know, there'll be a book coming out called Bradford Isms. So I'm going to give you one. I love this guy's quotes. One of my favorites is, if you remain open, honest, and truthful, you'll sleep at night and find that people will follow your lead during the day. I think there's a lot to be said, particularly in the world we live in today. Give us a time, maybe, Jim, when that was challenged for you and how that felt.
I think I'm going to use a public company example because there are the restrictions on a public company's ability to, when you have inside information, you know something that you can't talk about or release at that point in time. It's maybe in works, maybe it's something that is about to happen, and you know it's about to happen, but you can't predict it's happening. And I think that was hard because some of these, a couple of examples were when the company I was with did a lot of M&A. We were doing hostile tenders for companies, and so you could see a train wreck coming, or you could see some event about to happen, and you couldn't see anything, and that it affected people's lives, a lot of people's lives, and so having to know that you couldn't say sometimes what you wanted to say because of a lot of other restrictions going on was difficult. Others have been just kind of moral issues that how do you face that? Right. A difficult boss that was an alcoholic, or someone who was not following the mission or the vision or the ethics of the company, and what to do about that. Those were hard decisions to make.
It tugs, doesn't it?
It does tug.
It does. So for those that don't know, Jim's a reader and a learner. We know that. A biker and a golfer. I don't know about the biking, but I've seen the golf.
He doesn't want to see it again, I don't think.
No, you've got a great swing. Husband and father, obviously CEO of business and of a school. So help the students with this balance thing. Let's talk about you personally, because this balance of work, career, health, life. You look amazing for your age.
For 87, I'm as old as
He's
Dewey.
He's 13 years older than me. Look at this guy. But you've done it incredible. I have so much respect for how you've done that. Maybe share with the students, because you guys are going to have balance problems in about 6 months. So how have you done that?
Not well. I don't know. I think it's hard. I find that I don't know what refreshes you. For me, it's being alone, away from the Blackberries and the computers and all the noise that gets in our way. I like high places, so I like mountaintops. I like mountaintop experiences, but I also like mountaintops. Alone on a bicycle for me is great. I've got the noise turned off. I'm on my own. Most of the reflection I get is often the great ideas come from being alone, stopping the noise that's around you, and taking the time to do that. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time. It can be a half-hour ride in the morning, or something that gets you away from pieces. I read a tremendous amount, and so like to read lots of different things, not just The Economist and the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal, but lots of other forms of literature and reflection. And I use that, and then those are my main things. I think my wife has a really good incentives in life that she creates from time to time, and lets me know when I'm not paying attention, and lets me know when I should be paying attention. And so her idea of a good vacation is to get me where there is no technology. You cannot be reached. And that's only about a block from my house. Bowling Avenue doesn't have any receptivity at all. So I said, we don't have to go to someplace far. But seriously, she'll try to get me away and just give us some time together. And I think our 4 kids still can't believe that we're in love after 44 years. Like, you guys still like each other. Yeah, we do.
It's awesome.
We'd rather be with each other sometimes with you. That's a hard message for our kids to get. Really.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, talking about that, 22 of the Vanderbilt students got to go spend the day with Warren Buffett recently, and you know, anybody that's read about Buffett, he talks about read, think, and reflect,
Yeah.
And he thinks those are three qualities of business leaders. I tend to agree. Of course, when you're in Omaha, you have plenty of time for that. But it, you know, when you think about, I get a chance to work with the students all the time. I've never seen a brighter bunch with a better future. But Jim, let's talk about this read, think, reflect mindset versus this constant do. And you guys know what I mean by constant do, right? It looks like this. And it's 24/7, it's technology, it's Facebook, it's we're wired. And so what can you share with the students? Because that's the world we're in today. We know that read, reflect, think is important. So any thoughts there?
I don't know how many of you do this. I have what I call boulders sitting in front of me or concepts, and I think not getting frustrated by the moment and not getting mad. And I do. I won't say that I don't, because I could take examples of the last 72 hours and give you things that went on that would seem to have an urgency about them, that if they didn't get done, the world was going to hiccup or flip out or something. And I think having your own ability to kind of say, this really isn't important. What I'm doing here is really not going to change the course of humankind, and trying to stay focused on some very big issues in work, but also in life, and keeping those out in front of you has been helpful to me. I force myself to read, and I find I fly a lot, so a great time to read is on an airplane, because I purposely don't get on the Wi-Fi services on the airplane. I don't need that much connectivity. And that gives me a chance to just relax and read a book, or relax and read something I want to read. And I read everything from, I keep a life list of books that I kind of my top 10 books, and I keep changing those out. But those are helpful to me to go back and read, about Thomas Jefferson or Lincoln or the Civil War, or a particular author I like a lot. And I think those are helpful. They give you a time to kind of say, golly, what's going on right now really isn't that important.
Right.
And then lets you have some time.
Perspective.
Yeah.
You talk about planes. You've lived abroad. You've also traveled quite a bit over the years. So when you think about either working, as some of the students are going to work in a different country, different culture, thoughts around that, because you've had experience both living and doing business overseas.
I think business is difficult it's challenging in any business you're in any single country you're in, and start, mapping that across multiple borders and multiple continents and cultures and life. I think it makes the difficulty go exponential. And so, this is a little bit, but understanding the different cultures. So I made 45 trips to Japan in 5 years as I was running AFG after they bought us. I've been to Europe, I can't count the number of times, and then lived in other countries. And I think when I was in Germany, I was pretty fluent in German. One of my goals is to get back fluent in German again. I'd like to do that. I'm not there at all. But I think if you can learn the language of the people or have at least some frequency with that, you see so much more of a country. If you kind of go spend a day in Paris and say, well, I've seen France, let's move on. That doesn't work. And so I'm very much believe you need to live in a foreign country, or live in a different country than you grew up in, or at least have some experience there. I held up my hand every time. One of the ways I think I got to where I was when there was a difficult assignment, or they needed somebody to go do something, or even if it was a lateral move or not, I'd hold my hand and say, yeah, I'd like that. And it got to be where you got to see a lot of stuff that other people didn't. So I think it's critically important to understand the culture you're working in and what their goals are. And working with the Japanese was exciting and interesting, and I learned yes but meant no. When I first first started taking, I could spend about $50 million before I had to go ask permission on an acquisition, and so I'd take an acquisition to Tokyo to, vet it and do all the pre-meeting stuff, get in the boardroom, and the answer was yes, but Bradford's son, and they would give me, the but was like three things. We think they don't have a large enough market reach, whatever it was, whatever the three were. So I'd run back to the United States, solve those three things, come back, present the same acquisition, and it was yes, but. And it took me doing that 2 or 3 times to realize they're saying no. They just don't want to say no. And so okay, I figured this out, and there were all kinds of experiences like that. Having your business plan turned on its head, and what's our objective here? I thought we were trying to make money. Mm-hmm. There's another objective going on here. So we supplied Honda and Toyota, for example, at AFG, and we would build factories. I supplied GE and Whirlpool. We would build factories that you had no hope of making a profit the first several years till you had to follow your customer. And so, but I'm a profit guy, so I'm supposed to be making profit. So those were hard, but great learning experiences for me. Loved them.
Yeah, those are long trips too.
Yeah, they are.
So several folks in this room probably were born about 1987, but if we think about 3 events, you've got Black Monday, which was October 19th, 1987, and the stock market, for those that don't remember, declined 22% that day. And that was before you could look at your list of things and see what was blowing up. We had the dot-com collapse, which was 2000, early 01, and then obviously the Great Recession and the global liquidity crisis in 08. A couple questions around that. Which one of those scared you the most, and why?
I think what scared me the most has been the recent event, and the recent event of QE, whatever number we're in, 2, 3, and I think the equity bubble that's being created. I think we're in a position with the entitlement programs and with the quantitative easing that's driving interest rates to zero. I think what bothered me is we're first in uncharted territory. The second piece of that is that at age 40, and that's how old I was when the 87 crisis hit. At 40, I kind of there's a long runway in front of me. I've got a job, I've got a secure family, I've got a great life, I live in a nice place. Yeah, the market's gone down, but I got a lot of years left here. Maybe it's my perspective as my age. Maybe it's the fact that I don't think there's any clear pathway of what we're doing right now, and we're on uncharted waters. And I think the sovereign debt issues that exist. I tweeted or whatever the other morning about Cyprus, and here's a tiny little country smaller than the size of Vermont. And we've got it, the top of the news on all the talk shows and on the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and I'm going, wow, the correlation here is so high that the equity markets are just very fragile, and they were fragile in '87. I don't think they've gotten any less fragile. So I think the current time is pretty frightening.
Yeah, and those are some big ones that have happened. I mean, for you to have that as your answer is kind of scary, isn't it? But it is perspective, right? Age as well, and how much room and time. Let's talk about when and if one of these events happens. What kind of thoughts do you have for the students as to how to handle that? Because you've watched it. It looks like a train wreck, but any thoughts?
Well, I think it is one of perspective. So, bring it back to yourself. Have you really destroyed what? Your net worth? Net worths are replaceable. I mean, and that sounds flippant, but it's really not. You still got your health. You're still smart and you're educated. You're in the top 1% of educated people in this country, and frankly in the world. You can reinvent yourself if you need to. And actually change what doesn't kill you sort of makes you stronger. So I think, again, perspective, putting it in perspective, understanding how that's impacting you, and then kind of saying what's the plan ahead. And so when I left the world of business and came to academia, I started that process about 4 years in advance, knowing that's what I wanted to do and figuring out kind of how do you get in this business? What is it that you do to do that? And I'm sort of doing the same thing right now again. As what am I going to do next? And it's a variant on theme, but it's kind of fun to energize yourself again and say, okay, I'm going to go a different direction.
So what are you going to do next?
Right now, I'm going to say no to a lot of things. Not my wife, but a lot of the deal with the university is I have a year sabbatical, and then I have an offer to come back and teach for a couple of years. And so my intent is when I started thinking about that and kind of knowing that was what they do with deans that decide to step down or whatever.
Or popes.
Or popes, yeah. I kind of like a red robe, but I haven't figured out how to do that one.
I would thought you'd be sporting the Pradas today.
Yeah, well, also with the celibacy requirement, that didn't go
That's
over big
true.
either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go spend and go to Barcelona and teach in Barcelona for about a month.
That's great.
On 2 courses one of them's a new course that I'm interested in launching, and then bring that back to Owen and teach, and kind of from a global view. And looking at, I kind of looked at, do you do this in an emerging market or do you do this in a very mature market with lots of issues? And I kind of think from my own business experience, when we took the company private and I became CEO, the market did a double dive downward, and the 2 drivers of that industry suddenly collapsed, and it was like waking up with a cock 45 in your mouth every morning. It made you really strong. If you could survive that, you could do a lot of things. And so my issue was, when the market's going up, kind of all boats rise. In a really difficult market, it gets a lot harder. And so I wanted to go to a mature market that is having some issues and really kind of thinking about how do those companies compete. Many of you know Zara fast fashion, that piece. The guy that started that was, kind of think about it, he was in an industry that had been totally exported to Taiwan and then China. The apparel industry was a disaster. The capital markets didn't reward you for it. It had, the statistic is 36% of apparel bought by females is returned. If you think about that one for a while, going, really? Wow. I can't remember the last time I returned a suit or anything.
Big number.
In any event, and he did it. He had the guts to do it, and he's now one of the 5 or 6 richest men in Europe. Interesting.
Yes.
So I wanted to go see that world and kind of bring it back here.
So Greece was taken? That's why you decided Spain?
I was in Greece. I did a sovereign debt tour. And so I was in Greece the first day of rioting on that square.
I remember seeing your blog with the pictures outside the hotel.
Yeah, we got tear gas and all that
Yeah.
good stuff. And I said, nah, I don't want to get tear gassed.
No.
I just want to go. And Barcelona looks
Beautiful.
looked like a good place to go.
Well, I've got several more questions, but we've got some time. How about anything that pops for you guys that you want to ask Jim? Yes.
So you talked about your career path going in a number of different directions, and you talked about always saying yes to opportunities. But how did you sort of recognize opportunities that presented themselves, and then how did you assess those opportunities as they came along in your career?
So opportunities don't all come at once, and you get to pick the door that you like. It's like which door do you open and which door do you close. And so what early on at AFG, law was fine. It was a great teacher. It was a kind of a fun experience. I liked the fact that when I got to AFG, I was given lots and lots of opportunities, and actually working for a company that was, not huge. We were publicly traded. We were NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, but there was suddenly capital available to me. So if we wanted to do a project, I could go get the money to do it. That was such a strange experience to me to not have that before. So once I got inside and kind of learned the culture and what was there, I would seek out stuff that would be helpful, and part of that was going back to learning the company. So I didn't have any responsibility for the technology, but I went out and sat down with the head of research, and who later became my head of manufacturing. And you learn the business, you learn the company, and then watch that. I didn't see anything better around me. I did get approached by Kodak to go to work in the general counsel's office while I was at AFG, and I said, so what could if I did a really good job, what could I do? And they said, well, I guess you could be a department head. I said, okay. So if I did a really good job as department head, what could I do? And I went up the line, and they finally said, look, the most you could ever do was be general counsel. And I said, no, thank you. And I wouldn't have left AFG anyway, but I was just curious. And so that kind of piqued my interest in saying, once it got far enough along and I learned the customers and everything else, it became an ambition, and I got the opportunity to do it. So I think that the fact is kind of trying to evaluate what's in front of you right then, not jump too soon, and the grass is always greener on the other side. So look at that objectively, and then kind of look and saying, okay, is there a pathway here that I like or I can make? And there are not a lot of people that go from general counsel. That's, typically you come out of finance, sales, or marketing. Those are three big ones, or maybe is some other pathway. But those are the three big ones. And so I spent a lot of time with the sales guys. They're a fun bunch to be around. So they got to play all the golf and entertain the customers, and I'm sitting here with a stack of papers like that. I'm going, I think I've got the wrong job here. So anyway, that's what I like.
That's great. I think the other thing about that is, and you and I have talked about this, there's not a right or a wrong.
Yeah.
It can work either way. So don't think that you're going to make a big mistake either way, because you can be fun and fulfilled doing just about anything if you've got your health and your family and balance. And so a lot of times we think it's, oh my God, one's good, one's bad. And you and I've talked a lot about you can make it good no matter what if you have the right attitude.
Yeah, I mean, the example I would use in kind of my marital life, we had relocated to the headquarters to be next to Drexel Burnham Lambert, and my boss was living, the chairman of the company was living in Newport Beach, helicoptered every morning into the LA, and I was struggling to live in some place along the south of LA, and I had to bring my wife out there, and she got out there. And she started looking for schools and places kids could go, and churches and neighborhoods. And if you know Southern LA or Southern California, it's a very busy and interesting place to live. But she was struggling to kind of, where do we raise the kids? And she finally came to me and said, I can't stay here. Choice. And the choice I made was to go to my chairman and say, 90% of our assets exist somewhere else than LA. We had some operations, and we built plants in the high desert above LA and some other things. But I said, I got to pick between my marriage and my job. And I'm not going to give up a wife. I'll give up the job. And so I went to him and said, this isn't going to work. And he said, so where do you want to live? And I said, well, I don't know, but she's not going to make it here. And he said, that's fine. You live where you want to live. You just be on an airplane whenever I want you, wherever I want you. And that was the deal. That was the deal struck. And it was after that I got to be CEO.
Where'd you move?
I moved her back to Tennessee, and then I got on an airplane and flew all the damn time.
You need a helicopter.
I need more than a helicopter.
That's a great story. Other questions? Yeah.
As you hear stories, there's kind of a gradual progression to this,
Yeah.
move it up to here and here. Seems like a lot of folks, when you hear their stories, there's the failures that helped them realize the successes later, or that taught them the big lesson. Are there any big failures, personal, professional, something that kind of sets you where, it's something you've always remembered going forward?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you learn more from the very difficult times or failures of life. I think one of the things I admire about the company I worked for was failure was okay. I remember the chairman coming to me and saying, if you're right more than 50% of the time, you're not taking enough risk. If you're right less than 50% of the time, I'll fire you. So that was kind of the model, So there was an opportunity so in launching we launched some lines of business that didn't work. I think the worst business decision I made in life turned out okay. Was jumping too quickly. It's kind of looking at, I remember I was being courted after I decided to step down from AFG. I had worked for and loved the company, but I'd gone to them with a strategy that they rejected, which was they had some global businesses like automotive. They had some local businesses and regional businesses like construction. They had some fabrication businesses that had super high margins. They had some distribution businesses that didn't, and they had a lot of channel conflict going on. And so I said, sell this, merge this, keep this, take this one public. And they rejected all those and said, no, we would like to please just continue to collect the paycheck, if you would. And so that wasn't very exciting to me. I like to build things. And so I stepped down, and I jumped from there into a roll-up. And it turned out all right, but I understand why Wall Street hates roll-ups. And I wouldn't do it again. I mean, I wouldn't do it again if I couldn't have changed some things that you think you know a lot. I mean, by that time I was a pretty experienced CEO, pretty experienced business guy, and I learned a whole lot of new stuff doing that, and that was a great lesson to me. That was a life lesson to me. Is be careful what you look at and ask for, and make sure that your own thought process is you've done the right due diligence, but you've also don't overestimate how easy a thing could be. I tell people this is the hardest job I've ever had. And they go, well, how could that be? And my first reaction when I came to Owen was 50 faculty, 500 students. How hard could this be?
Versus 60 plants.
60 plants, 6,000 students, 6,000 employees spread across a lot of territory. And the reason is that in business there's this wonderful thing called profit. And profit unites us so often in what we're doing. We're driving for a result, and we kind of all understand what we do. And you build very complex systems of compensation and reward and everything around that. But there's this one idea. And what's difficult in this industry is that the currency of the faculty is research and teaching. And what the students want may be different than what the alumni want, or what the alumni want are slightly different than what they want. But we have 8,000 of them who pick up the phone with great regularity and call me and tell me, you need to be doing this. So it's the channels and the pathways and the difficulties of building incentive plans or reward people, which is what we're taught to do in business. It's what we teach here. Right. We do that, and so academia doesn't do that as easily. And it's nothing wrong with what they do. Obviously it's been around thousands of years, but hundreds of years anyway. But yeah, it's difficult. So I learned a lot from all those things, and I think those are the great teachers of life, is the failures or the challenges or the mistakes you make. And it's nice to exist in an organization or in a world where you're challenged to do something different, and failure is an option, because you can recover from that, I think.
Good point. Question back there, yeah.
So actually, my question is along the lines of your tenure here. What has been your greatest frustration in this role, not just at Owen, but in thinking about the business school industry?
I think, again, go back to the metrics. So I'm used to, I understand when you're running a business, and I've got, and I'm looking at my sales and my pricing, my volume and my pricing. I'm looking at my variable costs and my cost of goods sold. I'm looking at what drives that bottom line, what drives that operating income line, what's our capital structure, and what's our tax rates, and how do you change those things. So there are in any business, there are lots of handles, and one of the first things you do is figure out which handles can I pull, what's fixed and what's not. And so coming here, the metric, instead of being profit and earnings, is rankings. And so what are frustrating about rankings is that it's a black box. It's somebody's opinion who doesn't really know this environment, culture, people, what's being achieved. You're relying on them to kind of gain. There's not a good measure of the quality of the faculty. All the rankings don't give enough emphasis on what our faculty do. And so the fact that somebody can change your life dramatically by a stroke of a pen without any correlation necessarily between, a lot of it's a survey or it's an opinion poll or it's whatever, And that's frustrating. And so I think that's the hardest thing, and I think it's driving. No dean likes rankings. I don't care what you're ranked. And I think the hardest piece is that it's driving, I think, some unethical conduct in the industry, and you've seen it both at the undergraduate level by noted universities and at graduate school levels, not just in B schools. And that's a pretty sad commentary on what's happening. And so that would be my biggest frustration, is to say, I'm perfectly willing to stand accountable for what's going on. I just wish that the metrics were clear, and I knew that if I did this, then this would happen, and that's hard to do. So a little bit of it's mumbo jumbo stuff, and I don't always understand.
P&L doesn't lie, right? And then it's hard to find what is the scorecard.
Yeah, but think about it. If you were a philosopher, so how do you know what the performance metrics of philosophy are? I don't know. So maybe I'm too much of a numbers guy.
That's good. So for those that don't know, there's a rapid fire round that Jim invented, and since he invented, he knows how it works. So I'm going to take 2 of his favorite 6 questions, and then we don't want him to get too comfortable. I'm going to throw 4 in that I made up, and I was drinking when I did it. So, so let's run through this.
I've been drinking since you answered.
And then we'll see if there's a little time for questions. So far, some good ones. Thank you. So let's start with the 4 random ones, and here's how to. These are short answers, whatever comes to mind. So in time, who will be the greatest? Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods?
Jack Nicklaus.
Michael Jordan, LeBron James?
Harder question. Michael Jordan.
Ooh. Apple, Samsung?
Samsung.
Ooh. Ooh. Harvard or Vandy Owen?
Vandy Owen, no question.
Totally. Okay, so now back to 2 of your favorites. Who taught you the most?
My wife and my father. And in very different ways, obviously. But,
That's 2 good ones. And what one piece of advice would you have for your students?
I think a lot of life is how you approach it, and Doug is a sterling example to me. I think he approaches life with a great deal of optimism. I'm sure a great deal of objectivity, but with a attitude of moving forward, going to achieve, make this fun, and I think that's a huge attribute in academia that we don't pass along in a great way. It's almost a self-instilled way you approach life. And I think we've all been around the Eeyores of life, or the people that go through life with a black cloud over their head, and life is always miserable, and golly, I just can hardly get through the day. And they're not the fun people you want to be with in life. They're not the people that when it's in a difficult moment, in a knife fight, you probably want to go back to back with, because they're going to find something miserable about whatever the outcome is. And I think that having that attitude in business and in life will take care of you a long, long way. So it is about aptitude, but it's an awful lot about attitude as well. And I think that carries out in the interviews and in the job performance, and how you approach when you have those really difficult moments. I think as a CEO, one of the things you find out is you are the ultimate and forever steady person, and life has to be. You have to be motivating people no matter what's going on in your world. And if you can't, you're not going to make it.
Right.
So, hard thing to do, and it does get very, at times, lonely, because you hope you've got somebody like this I had a bicycle riding buddies that we would all share our common experiences with, and that was helpful to have a sounding board or something. But I would recommend you get one.
Great. Other questions? Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about getting out of your comfort zone? You mentioned several different points you can private practice, because the CEO.
Yeah, my wife's cried every time we move, so that's a good barometer to me. You're like, we're doing what? I think just maybe that a little bit, Paul, is having some self-confidence that I could do it, and an attitude of a willing to take a risk. I didn't really didn't see failure as part of the future for me, and felt like I was resilient enough and that I could move on to the next thing. If this didn't work, this could. And so it's okay. I think it's very refreshing to sit and say, you know, this has been great. I love what I've done, but I'm ready for the next thing. And then figure out what the pathway to get there is. And I just would encourage you to do that and push yourself at it. I mean, it's I just had one of our last year graduates who started out as a private wealth company, realized that really wasn't his thing, and changed back to a different pathway. And I was with him earlier this week, or late last week, and he's just happy as a lark. I mean, it was just amazing to watch, you know, that realization on his part, and then finding a pathway to go where he wants. And I think that's true about jobs. If you go to work for companies you admire, where you like the product and you like the management team and you like the industry they're in, and it's not about money. It really isn't. And that's what makes life joyful, is you can work in a good place, and have a decent other parts of your world as well. So.
Great. I saw a hand here.
Do you have any one achievement or success that when you look back, that's what you're the most proud of?
I'll do achievement at Owen. The leadership program we have today came about by two things. One of our students raising her hand in the back of one of my classrooms and saying, could we do this? Could we have a program of like this? And the second one was I had the experience of taking my management teams through the Center for Creative Leadership and doing assessment tests and learning that we all shared with each other, and it helped a lot in learning how we made decisions. And so building that, going out and getting the $1 million gift, watching how that's changed the environment here, and something that I think will live on is really important, and I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of a lot of other things, but that's one that I think will pay dividends in the future for the lives of many people, and I value that very much, so it's important to me.
That's great. You know, Jim, when I think about having known you and having the chance to be on the board and spend time with Vanderbilt, for me, Vanderbilt students, the faculty, Clark Core, Cracker Barrel, Genesco, Doug Cahill, we all have one thing in common. I think we're all better at what we do because of Jim Bradford. And so you've impacted all of us.
Okay.
And on behalf of everybody, I want to thank you for that.
That's very
You're
nice
not
of you to say.
leaving, but we are going to miss you short term. And with that, let me give you the last word for them.
I guess my last word is more than anything else is have faith in yourself and in your abilities, and execute that in a great way. Use your God-given skills and then grow them. You know, push yourself. Learn a new language, whatever it is that expands you. And I think doing that across your whole life is the most important thing you'll do, or one of the most important things you'll do. So
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.